Hi and welcome to Old Guard New Blood, episode 29. And this is SEO quality assurance and testing. I've got a fantastic panel in here today to talk about QA and testing. Let's bring them in. Why don't we? Let's start with you, Jess. Jess, Joyce, where are you and where do you come from? Who are you and where do you come from?
Yeah, there we go. My name is Jess Joyce. I'm an SEO consultant and I reside currently physically in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, or Toronto, if we really want to be cool.
So excellent. Thanks very much for coming along today.
Thank you for having me.
And you're half Hungarian, I understand.
I am, yeah. Half
Excellent.
Hungarian.
So we're going to bring in hello, Simon. How are you? Simon's in the audience.
Hi,
Thanks for
Simon.
coming along. Let's bring in a Hungarian colleague, Myriam. How are you? Who are you? And where do you come from?
Good. So I'm doing good. I'm a complicated one. I'm half French, half Hungarian, grew up in Hawaii, and up until recently, I was residing in Montreal, Quebec, but I'm currently in Budapest, Hungary.
Excellent, fantastic. I was down in Budapest just last week as I went up a boat on the Danube up to Vienna or Salzburg, and now I have COVID. So anything that's going to go wrong today, I blame it entirely on boats on the Danube.
COVID and high cholesterol because of the local cuisine too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've got tablets for that, so that's not a problem. Chris, who are you? Where do you come from?
Hello, I'm Chris. I'm residing in Essex, which sounds a lot less interesting, frankly. I'm also an SEO consultant and do lots of other stuff, but that's what you mean, just outside of London.
I mean them all. Essex. I mean all these things. So, guys, I think you've all underplayed yourself on your QA and your skill sets, but I'm sure we'll get into all of that as we go through. The whole event, guys, has been sponsored by Majestic. So I'll say at the top of the show the advert for Majestic, because Majestic has just got in beta mode a new menu and a whole new layout and stuff. So I know a lot of our customers a lot of our listeners are majestic.com users. So even if you're not, you want to have a look at the new stuff. If you go to majestic.com, if you're not logged in, there's a big button on the homepage, and you go and have a look at the new menu, and it's got you can see all Wimbledon stats for free at the moment on there. If you are logged in and you're having trouble getting to the new menu, go to newmenu.majestic.com, and then you can use it as a paid user in there, and go with it. It's some great stuff. It brings a lot of the functionality that Majestic had to the fore. So you'll probably find some new features you didn't know were in Majestic. And with that, I'm going to bring in my producer, David. David, how are you? And what have I missed out?
Very good indeed. Nothing at all. But all I want to say is that the majority of people that consume this show do so via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And I just want to say, if that's you, if you're listening away, come and join the hilarity next month. Come and watch us live. Sign up at majestic.com/webinars. Hopefully you can make the next live one. You can be part of the audience. You can be interacting with whoever happens to be on next month's episode. And I'll tell you exactly what the topic for next month's episode will be and who's going to be taking part at the end of the show.
So you can join Simon Cox in the audience in the live show. That's brilliant. Good. Okay, guys. And if there's anyone else live on the live stream now, and you want to ask questions of the group, then absolutely feel free to do so. Okay. Well, so, Simon is chipping in here in the text. Right. Let's get into the heart of the matter. We're going to be talking about trying to find out whether your SEO work or the team that you use for your SEO, whether their work is of high quality. And I think it's a really tough one to crack. I remember when I was agency side and I was doing SEO consulting, it was sometimes hard for, even me to work out whether I'd done a good job, leave alone have anybody else looking on there. But that was a long time ago. So I think I want to start with asking people at the top, if people haven't got 45 minutes to hang around and get all the tidbits of information, if they can't stay for the whole show, what one tip might you give to people for, you know, for being able to assess whether SEO efforts of yourself or somebody else are of a good quality? I'll let Chris jump in with that one first, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got two. I'm cheating. One small one and one larger one.
Okay.
The small one, and I don't see this happen enough, is just annotate on like Google Analytics or similar when changes go live, and just kind of keep that view that you can understand that relationship between sort of significant deployments and improvement or not of rankings. That's really kind of key. But then the other one is, use forecasting as an SEO to work out, if we did nothing different, where does the forecast say we should go, and test yourself against that. That's a quick thing to say and a hard thing to do properly, but more people need to just
I might come back to
some of
that,
those libraries and test themselves.
I might come back to that, because you know the tools to do that are not always straightforward to
not always.
to come with. So okay, all right, interesting. Jess, what do you got as an idea for us?
I would say setting expectations is the one that I would suggest, and just like making sure everybody understands the amount, or the small or the big or whatever you're doing, how big it is, and like the variables that can go into it. So I know it takes a lot of education internally, depending on whatever changes you're doing, and if you're just changing a title, it might be something small, but you know, your click-through could change, and like just communicating and over communicating with people, because like once you go through QA, I feel like it's a pressure point, and a lot of pressure gets put on that feeling. So yeah, just making sure everybody understands if and when things go wrong, that you've communicated properly.
Excellent. Okay, so setting expectations and making sure people know where they're trying to go to in the first place sounds interesting, and again, something that's easy to say and probably really hard to put in practice.
Great.
So, Myriam, what's your tip for the group?
So I have two, and I'm not as rational or as empathic as the two other people on the panel. Having survived dev centers, the first piece of advice I would give is save everything. You can save crawls, because I've seen situations in QA where doing this new thing you want to do, somehow, by some miracle, it breaks everything else you had done in the past 6 months. And you will bring this to the attention of the powers that be. And what happens? You get told, oh, no, it was always like this. No, have a crawl, save it. And the other one is, on your end, have a checklist, please. Like, sweet zombie baby Jesus, have a checklist. Because we will always forget things. And it's not the same checklist for each situation. We judge ourselves way too harshly, going, this should have been done, and this should have been done, and this should have been done. Otherwise, it's all going to fail. And then you cry at 2 a.m. in your cubicle in the agency. No, don't do that. Just have a proper checklist that says, hey, here's the baseline of what we're trying to achieve. Like, if we have this, we can actually measure if something has changed. We're safe with that baseline.
Actually, you know what? That's a damn good bit of the tip, really. I mean, because as soon as you've got a checklist, at least you've got some kind of quality assessment. You know, you can sit there and say, right, have all the things on the checklist been done? But is that easy? I mean, okay, if you're going to say, right, well, I want to update the content on this, the title of this page, you haven't really got a checklist in there. Or maybe your checklist is, it's got to be this many, between this many and this many words, I suppose, and it's got to mention the keywords on the page. Or you could maybe come up with a small checklist for a title, or but it's not always easy to.
I have one for content tuning. I basically try to make people as independent as they can be doing this, and go, hey, you should be checking this in Google Search Console. If you have this, you should be doing this. If you don't have this, here's how to handle it, and move forward. But I think ultimately the checklist is a tool to communicate to other people. Here's the standard we are holding ourselves up to, and here's why it matters. So you can actually take this and feel confident to flag things, because SEO is not just one person in their cubicle at 2 a.m. It's actually the entire team that's trying to accomplish something.
So would you say then, that a great way to approach QA testing is to have a series of checklists that people know that they've got to be judged by before they get into any project? So one for content, one for technical, one for, the state of your server, whatever it may be.
I'm going to say yes and let my other peers answer.
What do you reckon, Chris and Jess? Good idea, or Jess?
Yeah, broadly, I mean, a lot of the testing or the QA for you and for everyone else, like, you know, I use a lot of other tools and software to sort of run those tests for me, whether they're of your own recipes or someone else's. You know, that there's a list of kind of compliance steps that you always need to maintain. That's not necessarily absolutely everything exhaustive, but, you know, if you're not meeting these certain standards, you know, server response codes, robots, all of those kind of key ones, you know, it's going to go drastically wrong. So, and they always need to be constantly checked. I think the worst thing that can happen in that scenario is when you're like, no, we already know all that's taken care of, right? But if everybody that's involved takes that same approach, you'll catch a cold because someone won't do the test, or something will get deployed and it'll go wrong and it will break and no one will have checked it. So, you know, you can never have too much due diligence on those key points.
Well, I think we've all been in those situations where somebody's like, everything's fine, it works fine, it's great, awesome, we're just gonna push it. But like, at least if I like to make a list of critical things, just and maybe like lower ones.
Traffic lights.
Yeah, traffic lights, something of those matters at least. So at least, like, if you're gonna push something, then at least we have time to check these things. So, like, because you're going to have to let stuff go in any level of SEO. in a dream world, you would have everything, but, you know, time being what it is, and resources being what they are, and developers always pushing back on every level, you have to work on what you have. So
Simon Cox jumps in. Checklists are like a car MOT. Doesn't stop you crashing, though.
I have an answer to this. I have an answer to this. Today, before we all met to discuss this, a friend of mine comes on Twitter and is like, yeah, we have to talk. I have a problem. Google Search Console, all the data is gone. Like, it's gone. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to run, but first things first, breathe. Second step, let's start with a checklist. And I was like, maybe your old code was just validating one version of the website. And maybe since the relaunch, you decided to go like the other version. So VVV, no VVV. And maybe that's why your Search Console goes. Pfft. And I was like, this is step one of the checklist. Like, that's the type of thing I would look at. And after that, we can get worried. And they got back to me and they were like, this was it. And I was like, okay, we don't need to do step 2 of the checklist. And I know this sounds really funny, but imagine the panic that you have if you enter and you don't have the data and you're supposed to be the person who knows it all, like the expert. And you're like, I expert, there is no data. What do I do? So there's that panic. That's why I like checklists. Yes, Simon, we are still going to crash. I mean, clearly. But we're trying our best and putting a seatbelt on, okay? Because not everything depends on us, but the seatbelt we can do.
Okay. So, guys, I wanted to dive into the different elements of SEO a little bit, and what we might want to have in said checklist or in QA testing, QA and testing. But before I do that, I want to think a little bit about the stakeholders that we've got in the SEO, world, because they might consider very different things as important. So, a business, the business itself might consider value for money, whatever that is, as the thing that they're trying to get out of there. They know that they could spend more to get an extra, half mile, but do they want to go there? Whereas the in-house SEO might consider, conversions attributable to organic traffic and sort of think about the UX, whereas the agency might stop and say, well, once we've got the organic visitor, that's all that's important to us. And the in-house developer might just want to give, say, well, as long as I don't have to mess around with anything on the site that's going to take away from my core tasks, then I'm happy. So people have got different views as to what they want out of SEO. So how deep are these differences, and how can they be molded into a quality assurance or testing protocol that everyone might be able to agree with? It's a hard question. I don't know if anybody wants to have a crack at it.
I would like to nominate Chris.
Oh, that's good. I was going to jump in anyway. So I mean, the thing I usually find is you kind of, certainly from the SEO point of view, I try and learn what are everyone else's KPIs and what are they trying to achieve. And then
how often do they know?
That's an interesting one. I think if we really struggle, the question I usually ask someone is, what metric will stop you getting a bonus or a pay rise? Like, where's that?
Yeah.
And that can sometimes be a bit blunt force, but you actually find that a lot of the metrics are overlapping, or you can find a way. And actually, it's just presentation of what that looks like. So page speed, that can help performance, that can reduce carbon costs, that can increase conversion rates, that can increase rankings. And it's kind of like, what's the story we're going to package all of this initiative under that makes us all look great when we do it? And obviously I work a lot with product teams, and product teams have to deliver products that then work and get the engagement and buy-in from the other teams. And it's just showing that there is some kind of harmonized view, that you've all agreed on this KPI set and you have a way to track it. I quite often track or report on metrics that aren't mine, but I know that I can measure it better than other people can. And actually very often just helping show that and bringing light to it, because most of the problems around all of this is that people just do not have the measurement in place. Like, they don't know what they need to measure, or if they're measuring it, they don't know how to interpret that. And if you can nail that bit and then make people see that you're the one that's kind of owning that bit, that's really advantageous, because they'll want to come in with you. And the other one is then with that is, if you've got different stakeholders that have different interests or different metrics, if you see something that doesn't look great, go and have a quiet conversation with them first, talk about it, and then present it back to the group. Like, if everyone's on an equal footing, that's fine. But the minute you kind of say, no, there's a curveball, your metrics are doing badly, and you've got to explain that in front of everyone else, then it turns into infighting and a battle.
Yeah,
pretty
I'm
quickly.
sure it does. That's why I'm not.
Very
That's
quickly.
not why I'm an SEO consultant anymore. Because horrible. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, try and talk one-on-one, I suppose, at that point. But also, you can't hide those issues. When something's going south, it's got to be addressed. You just got to get away from that.
You don't ambush someone with it.
Yeah, you can't, and you've got to make it very clear that can't take this personally. Things go wrong. Things happen,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
it's tackling the problem, not the person behind the problem. So yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this idea of benchmarking then really becomes an important factor, I guess, for QA testing. You started with forecasting as something important, Chris. Jess, you said set expectations, and Myriam, you said checklists. So so having these benchmarks is really important. But what should go into a benchmark? Should it be, when I was doing SEO as a consultant, 20 years ago, it was literally taking some keywords and where they rank now, and then hopefully in 6 months time they're going to be all ranked better. That doesn't seem to be very so it doesn't seem to be as effective as it was before, because we're not really always thinking in terms of keywords. But what sort of things do you set down as a benchmark to test against? And I can't see anybody because I'm the only one on my screen at the moment. I want to pick on Myriam because her microphone's off.
Oh, it is?
No, yeah. No, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Well, on my end, when it comes to benchmarking, well, there's multiple things. So if you are in an agency setting, you have to make sure that whatever you are setting up will be able to be reused for that client, but also like internally makes sense. There's nothing worse than you going on vacation and somebody tries to get into your stuff and they can't, and they call you. Avoid that. That's the first part for me. The second part is, if you are going to set up something, so let's say an auditing process. I don't think I'm the only one who has had to deal with the situation of being called in to actually check some other agency's work or some other consultant's work. Yes, I specialize in this, sadly. So it's the situation of explaining, hey, we all have different ways of doing the same thing. We all talk about search intent and how it's different and it's changing. Yeah, we're human. We do the same thing in our jobs. So for me, when it comes to benchmarking, it's a question of developing what works and adapting to your environment. So for example, if you're in a dev center, I try to make sure that we all agree on certain definitions, like how are we testing this period and what is considered a passing grade. So for example, very basic one for me, but I complain about technical QA a lot. When it comes to JavaScript, if, for example, Google shows up on your page and rendering wise, it can't tell this is a transactional page because there's no price, there's no reviews, there's no product name showing. You have to wait a little bit. Hey, that's a baseline for me. That's something I'm going to check. Like, that's something we all agree on. We have to discuss that as a team. This doesn't fly. Because another issue that I want to bring on the technical end, developers are kind of like wizards, and which is if they want, but they can like fix stuff and go, there, I fixed it. And you go in the back and it's like Homer Simpson all pulled back. For SEO, you can't do that. It shows the bot will find this. So there's some people that you work with that are not used to your level, your benchmark of this is what should go out. They're not used to that. So that will create clashes. And that's why I think what Chris said is go talk to the person first and foremost. Like, you can't have your benchmark. Doesn't matter if the person is not onboarded. I'm sorry, I don't hear you. No, you're just beautiful. But
Oh, you're
no
on
sound.
mute, Dixon.
I absolutely agree, and I suspect the other two will agree as well. But doesn't that cause a little bit of a problem internally, because there is this balance at a business level between cost, OCD, and risk? You know, so SEOs, well, I'm not, but other SEOs are OCD and they want to get it exactly right, and they're never perfectly happy, and they have to go to a point at which they say, "Oh, right, I live with that." You know, but
you will get fired if you make your company spend 50K on improving speed and there's nothing left and you have nothing to show for it.
Well, this is it. I mean, at some point you have to say, right, there is, whether it's a money constraint or a time constraint, there is a point at which you have to ship the product, and it shouldn't really be the SEO that holds it up that often, unless, and this is what happens, I know, is that the developers say, right, we're ready to go, we're going live now, and you can fix it afterwards, and the SEOs have to come in after the fact. And at that point, I think the SEOs have every right to say, give me my money back, or rather, you know, just pay, because you've screwed it up out of the box. But it's still there is this problem here, this dilemma with QA. I mean, I remember, like you, Myriam, a long time ago, I was asked to do an audit on somebody else's audit, so for a major national newspaper, and I was thinking, well, okay, it's great if you've got that budget to spend on doing it for me again, and I'll do it all again. And what the original guys had done was not bad at all. I mean, I found a few points, but now I'm starting to pick holes in somebody else's, which I suppose you have to do all the time, Myriam, if that's what you do, pick holes in somebody else's work. But that's not really as good as being able to tell them what they did right, I would guess.
Yeah. And you're always going to find something. Like, if you're doing that, you're going to find something wrong. Like, I feel like you're just like, audits are kind of like from that perspective of that consultant or that agency or whatever it is, right? So you can always find something if you're looking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is, nothing's ever perfect as well. So if you do one thing right, it's probably going to have an impact performance-wise or content-wise on another factor. You know, if you rank better for this word, you're going to rank worse for that word. So, Myriam, you want to jump in?
Yes, so there's a few things that are jumbled up in my head. Let's get them out one at a time. I had a situation where I was actually brought in to do an audit, and the person took my audit. It was a paper audit because I don't know why we had to print them, and it shows I'm old. Took it, thanked me for it, opened a drawer and dropped it with the rest of the audits. I'm not joking. Like, this was a reality. So for me, when we're talking about audits, if I'm onboarded to redo an audit, I ask them why, and I try to provide actionable stuff that they can do, which goes back to QA, because when it comes to QA, if you're going to QA something and say, this does not pass, explain why. Try to explain, if we don't do this, we may end up with this, and document it. So at least if you are headed for a crash, mentioned to Simon, well, you can go back and have a postmortem to say, hey, as a team, how can we avoid this horror show again? I can't do it on my own. What do you propose? And for me, QA is also about automation. What can you automate as part of the QA team or the dev team's flow? Like, what do they normally check? And can you kind of piggyback on this? Can you say, hey, add this other check for me? You know what it means. And we consider this passed.
I like that. So, I mean, yeah, because the coders will have a often a pretty rigorous QA to check before they ship the code, but they won't include the SEO's stuff in there. So that's a good tip, I think. Yeah,
and it's one of the wonderful things because you can genuinely integrate with everyone. So there's no whose responsibility is this? Because let's be honest, all four of us, we all get Google Search Console emails. Even if you don't work in that field actively, Dixon, I know you get them. We all get them. But that's the thing. Your client gets them. Your design team gets them too. Like everybody's added on Google Search Console lately, and nobody does anything with it. Nobody. So if it's no one's responsibility, it sucks. If you have those emails coming in, they end up in Slack in that specific channel, you can assign responsibility. Like get into the flow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Monty says hi, and Chris is waving his hand in the chat as well. So thanks for coming in, Monty. And Simon says get paid up front, which I think is fair, but at the same time, I think when we're really looking at the quality before we ship, I think we need to sort of maybe dive into some of the areas of SEO because it's not easy to do. I mean, let's take content for example. How do you do QA on content? What things would you put into your checklist, Myriam, or what would you put into? I mean, for me, I probably just go through my Yoast plugin and sit there and make sure it's got, or use my other business to check my content and make sure I've got some stuff in there. But how does an average person say that content's good or that content's bad? It's going to be very different for every business, surely.
I have a very haute couture, vintage, curated process that most people are not going to like. So I'm going to let my colleagues answer first, and then I'll bring out the old school type of thing.
Oh no! See, that's made it sound more interesting than anything I'm
going
to
possibly say. Gosh.
So I mean, for me, a content QA process, there's a couple of things. I think firstly, if the content's live, let's look at the data. So who's using it? Who's visiting it? Are they completing their goals? Is it ranking? If that's the point of the content, I think that's the kind of the boring take. I think more and more my content QAs, what is the intent of what is being targeted? So obviously I'm taking a very kind of straight on SEO approach to this, but is this content just fit for what it needs to do? Like, is it exceeding expectations or even meeting the searcher's expectations, not just ranking for it because it makes sense? And actually, in my experience, that's where the vast majority of content fails, because it's a good keyword on an okay page with some less good content to actually do it for. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's legible and the grammar's fine and it's been written by a human that vaguely knows what they're talking about, but it's just deployed wrong and it's not going to last a year's worth of algorithm reshuffles and EAT or whatever you want to chuck at it, basically. And I like that one because it's simple in its purity as well. Because when you go to the stakeholders and say what's wrong with this content, you don't go the keyword density is too low and your word count's too low and there aren't enough internal links. You just say this is not fit for the people who will use it, and Google will rank you down for that. And maybe oversimplistic, but that's the easiest to communicate.
I'm literally doing that process right now with a client. It's not even essentially a QA. It's like a refresh. So we're just using like an Airtable and then going through and understanding what the content is doing, how it's performing, and which content should be merged, or if the user is actually reaching the intent, or if they're signing up for trials, how close they are to the buying cycle, and all of those things that go along with it. So it's less of a QA, but it is a QA at the same time.
I guess this is something that is close to my sort of active area at the moment, and I think for me, if I'm looking at a piece of content, then I can go and talk to. If I had clients, I'd be able to talk to the clients and say, the problem with this content is that if you want to rank for this concept, you're not talking about this idea or this idea or this idea, and your competitors are 4, 5, and 6 times over here, here, and here. And so you can see a gap analysis of the concepts and ideas, which to me is the approach that I'd go on content. And then on top of that, I'd still put, whether you use Rank Math, Yoast, or any other whatever thing, I'd still use all of those as well, because I think that's useful, and make sure that they've got checklists like cite an authoritative source or whatever the other bits and pieces, or use your keyword in the title and some of the more boring bits. But I think that can improve things. But what if we move on to technical SEO? Oh, sorry, Myriam's dying to speak. Go on.
I do have one thing that you haven't spoken about. So in my haute couture approach. Well, when
course.
we're QAing,
I've got
the
COVID,
content-
Myriam. I'm got COVID.
COVID brain. Okay, so Simon was saying, hey, can an SEO QA content, should this not be the subject matter, like the SME who's going to do this, like the person writing it? Well, not always. The way I QA content is very old school. I will tell people, oh, your content is not working. You optimize this product page and it's not showing up. Like you're just not getting visibility. You're not getting traction, not getting clicks, nothing. Let's go figure out why. And very often you will find in the search result pages, hey, Google's positioning aggregators and home pages, that product page, it's not going to fly. So you're literally cannibalizing yourself. So please just optimize the home page. Or you're going to have situations where two people or more than two people don't talk. And I had a client like this recently where they had 150 posts about Instagram styles for whatever clothing at any time. Like their winter content was off the roof. I'm like, can we not do this? Can we please just focus on writing one thing, not pushing out content that nobody cares about? You pushed out fashion content for winter as soon as winter started, in the middle, at the end, and when there was like that last blizzard. Can we talk about some other stuff? This is also SEO QA for me, and we don't need a subject matter expert on winter fashion to say, hey, too much Instagram stuff, please stop. So these things matter to me.
But I also think that an SEO or SEO with tools has the ability to jump in and see what they might be very, very minor concepts that have been missed out in the body text, that you can then refer back to the subject expert. And so the subject expert can say, yeah, all right, I didn't realize that our competitors have brought in that particular angle to this particular conversation. I'll add that in. It's only a sentence, but it makes a huge difference to whether this is the more authoritative piece than the other one. So as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, man, and Monty was jumping in with some stuff there. I won't bring it up on the podcast, but she was talking about her audits. And how do you do quality assessment for off-page SEO? Things like links, or Google My Business listings, or social media profiles, or things that are part of the SEO process in a slightly less obvious format. I mean, is that something that you would actively do QA testing for? Backlinks. Let's say backlinks, for example.
See, this is a tricky one because what makes a good link isn't, in my opinion, the same that makes an effective link. And there's this kind of differentiation of actually some stuff that works shouldn't do, but it won't forever. And some stuff that is in theory a great link takes too long and doesn't always move you. I mean, the best kind of process around links is actually just, if you're not trying to fly too close to the sun or buy too many links or do anything that the Google says you shouldn't be, and actually you're using the QA to work out, well, what's another agency bringing in, or what am I getting picked up naturally? I would rather be on that side of the equation, but that's as much because actually building the links isn't so much of my forte. But the key test that I run at the moment, and this is maybe because I sort of, I've done link cleanup on far too many sites back in the days, is actually just, can I see that this is a website that Google will want to penalize eventually? Like, is this of any value? Does it drive traffic? Is there a network footprint that I can see? What are the linking, out tendencies? And I think I have some basic flags, and again, a checklist against that. And then, once you get this stuff that's what I'd call high risk in the future out of the way, it's just variations of, it'll probably do nothing to, this is a really good link, do more of that. And that's the kind of dimensions that I try and do. But I don't subscribe necessarily to the whole, these links are toxic, delete them now, otherwise you're going to, regress it later. I'm not really convinced that's that necessary these days.
I think Jess and I have a nugget when it comes to backlinks being in a bilingual country. Well, very often the main domain, like the main URL, like yourdomain.com, will get all the links. However, depending on where you are in Canada, you may want to figure out very quickly which linguistic version is getting those links. Because if you're getting a lot of like English backlinks and your homepage is in French, that's also something you should be QAing for. Like, that's a decision that's really hard to make for us in Canada.
Yeah. Jess, anything you want to add on there?
I know, I agree with both of them actually, and I've had both situations. The dimensions that you gotta kind of go on. I always go on. The one piece I would add is traffic and how many people are because I work with a lot of SaaS companies.
Mm.
They always like trials. You know how many people have come from there. So I tie everything as close to money as I possibly can. Which is always the hardest thing to do. And really, that's honestly my biggest takeaway from all of this QA is I tie as much as I possibly can to money.
Yeah, one of the challenges there is that if you're going to tie a link back through to the money, then you've probably got something in the URL, which then makes it a non-unique, not a sort of a unique link, which makes the whole, you know, how do you get a 301 message to it, or I don't know. So there's a whole load of problems if you're going to put voucher codes in links, for example.
Exactly. And then to Myriam's point of like, yeah, is most of the websites that I also work on are bilingual. So targeting per where you're targeting, because Quebec is its own region in itself. So a beautiful part of our country. But when you go into Quebec, the signs literally change from English to French. So they don't define that English is part of what they're speaking at the moment there. So they think of that on the internet as well. So you need to understand.
I don't know if you can feel the tension. We're going to leave that one alone.
Everywhere else in the country, it has to be bilingual, but in Quebec, it has to be just French. So
just French, because that's
how they roll.
Well, fair enough. I'm not going to go into your politics. There's
enough
politics in the world, all right. So I think going back a little bit to Chris's observation. For me, I think that I only emotionally counter link if I see it as a value. So I would tend to, if I'm going to use Majestic's tools, for example, there's other tools that are available, but I would sit there and really probably only count links that have got some kind of citation flow and citation trust flow in their source as well. Otherwise, they're not really, of value. So that cuts out probably 80% of most links that are coming in. I then will pare it down to a few other things that are important to me, and really probably for any business a better way of looking at things might be, let's have a look at the top 50 links of your business, and everything else after that doesn't matter. So whether you're IBM or whether you're a small business, it's the top 50, and can you make those better than they were before? Because Google is saying, I have been saying for a long time, whether everyone believes them or not, that the rubbish links are just rubbish. They're just ignored. And I think that's not just the rubbish links, but it's most links, are ignored. So it's just trying to get the ones that have a signal either to Google or to a human. They're the ones that are important, I think. And so maybe just concentrate on the top 50 or top 10 or top 20 and see if you can improve them, because they'll still be there afterwards. Okay, we're running out of time already. So I'll just quickly ask about things like GMB listings and social media profiles and stuff like that. Is that something that you think SEOs should be checking on and looking up? I mean, Google My Business, I assume, they're getting rid of that, aren't they? But those kind of things. Google My Business is just a big directory listing, isn't it? But should we be checking on those kind of things as well? Or is that kind of so SEO 101 that you're just hoping that it's been done?
I got frustrated because Google took forever during the pandemic to actually release some reviews that were made. So if you're just checking in on these, you will get very frustrated. That's all I wanted to say on that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is foundational. I think if you are a business that relies on people coming to you, or you have bricks and mortar premises, you need to rank in map packs and bits. I think that has to be part of the checks. I mean, the QA one is just, NAP, simple, like name, address, phone number. Just, do we have consistency? Does it relate to the website? I have stopped going into like the networks of citation listings to try and clear it up. I've spent far too long doing it at a real sort of low level. I think now I can't remember the top 6 or the top 10 or whatever it is, aggregators that seed a lot of that data. If they're accurate in there, you've verified your listings and you're getting notifications when stuff changes. For me, that's what I do. But I think if the more kind of businesses you have within that network, the more it pays back to keep a really super close eye on that. The last thing you want to do is effectively lose control of a premises for 6 months. Don't notice it, then you come in to find a slew of bad reviews, someone's changed your opening hours, hijacked the URL, which I've seen all of that. That can't happen.
For
on your
folks
watch.
who don't see us, we're all shaking our heads in agreement.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, you don't lose control of your property. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys, we're already up time, so I'm going to bring David in and ask David. What do we got next week and or next month rather, on the next show? Whenever the next
next month, indeed. Yeah, next month. It's going to be on the 3rd of August, and that's going to be episode 30, up to episode 30 already. We're going to be talking about how can SEO and UX work together. Ooh. We've already got Eureka Viberg from unicorn.se booked for that one. We'll have another couple of SEOs probably for that one as well. But August the 3rd is the date of the next show. And if you want to watch that one live, just go to majestic.com/webinars and sign up there.
Fantastic, guys. So just before we all go, why don't you guys let us know how people can get hold of you if they want to get an audit of an audit? Myriam, where do they go and find you?
So I'm if you are French or French Canadian, find me on LinkedIn at Myriam Jessier. If you want to just chat and have fun or complain about something, on Twitter at my name, Myriam Jessier, once again. And I just wanted to say one last thing. I'm old enough to remember when Majestic was Majestic SEO. I just want to know if I'm alone in this. Leave a comment, please.
So it used to be called Majestic 12 before that. But anyway, I'll leave that to
we're not that old.
So Myriam Jessier is spelled MYRIAM JESSIER for everybody that hasn't got a screen, which is most of us. Jess, where do people get hold of you, and why won't they get hold of you?
Sure, you can contact me at Myriam Jessier. Or I hang out on Twitter a lot. It's my friend at Jess Joyce, JESSJOYCE, or JessJoyce.com. I keep a track of hurdles currently. Hurdle is like the Wordle for music, so check it out. I'm keeping a historical version of it on my website. It's fun.
Very good, very good. We're getting some nice thank yous from Monty and people out there. So thank you very much, guys. Chris, what about you? Why do they want to get hold of you, and where do they go?
Why would they want to get hold of me? I don't know. Good question. I kind of helping people solve more technical kind of search things using kind of newer technologies, testing, edge, bits and pieces like that. But you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn at Chris Green SEO. DMs are open, or find me on my website, drop me a message. We'll chat about SEO.
And if you can't spell Chris Green, you're in the wrong business, guys. So thanks very much for coming along. I appreciate it to everybody in cyber interweb land. Thanks very much for coming along, and we'll see you next time. And do check out newmenu.majestic.com if you're a Majestic user, or even if you're a different link technology user and you want to see the new layout, then go to newmenu.majestic.com. Bye, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thanks for doing this.